I don't have any dragons. Well, okay, I don't really have any dragons that look like the dragons in this movie, so that doesn't really help me. Um, so, Brenda. She's like, what? What did I do? You didn't do anything. You're perfect. You're my good girl. Good, pretty girl. Who likes to stab me with her nails. Yep, I do. That is what they are for. For stabbing mommy. Kiss, kiss. Good girl. Okay. Yes, I love you very much. You're my good girl. My good girl. So, I keep getting mixed up for which ones is supposed to happen next for when it comes to the Studio Ghibli movies, and like I had said that it was supposed to be From Up on Poppy Hill, but it's not. It's actually Tales from Earthsea. So I'm just gonna stop doing that now, where I say what the next one is, because I keep getting it wrong. Because I keep putting them in the wrong order when I'm trying to look stuff up. So sorry about that. Not that anybody probably noticed. Or if someone does, then whatever, then fine. So this is going to be about Tales from Earthsea, which came out in 2006. It is actually the directorial debut of Goro Miyazaki, who is Miyazaki's son. I know that he has directed at least one other Studio Ghibli movie, and I think it was actually From Up on Poppy Hill, so I'm actually not too far off in that regard. But so the movie is Tales from Earthsea. It is based off of a book series of kind of the same name by Ursula K. Le Guin. And there's like 4 volumes, 3 of which kind of get referenced in the movie or have used as some of the story plots in the movie with some references to one of the other ones. For reference, reference to the reference, I have never read these books. I have seen a live action adaptation of these books that had, I think, Morgan Freeman played Sparrowhawk, and the guy I think that plays like the main heroine is played by one of the it's either the guy that played Bobby / Iceman in the X-Men movies or his twin, because they look exactly the same and I don't remember which one was which. But yeah, so there's that connection. So I have seen that, and then of course I've seen this animated adaptation in regards to this, but I'm not exceedingly familiar with the source material, so I can't really compare them that much. I know a lot of people don't think that this was a very good adaptation, but I mean, I don't know. That's not really, I don't really have the ability to compare it. So yeah, there's also a Goro also based parts of this off of Journey of Shun by Hayao Miyazaki, which was like this little additional adventure little thing that Miyazaki had done years previously, and all of that. So I guess these books were popular enough in Japan that they got a hold of them. So, or that they were popular enough in Japan that they decided to turn this into a movie, which, I mean, of course, the movie is beautifully animated. I think the character designs are great. I'll comment on a couple of them throughout the course of the movie, or throughout the course of the review, but I don't really have too much else to say in that regard for comparing of stuff, since I've never read the books. So, going into the movie, and as I said, this is actually one that I've probably watched the least out of the ones that have been out for quite a while, because this movie has been out for 18 years at this point in time. 2006, excuse me, yeah, 18 years, I think. It's been out for over a decade and a half, and it's probably one of the ones that I've watched the least, not because it's bad, it's just not one that I've connected that much to. I still enjoy the story, but yeah, so that's where that ends. going into the actual story of the movie, the opening lines of the movie, as like a lot of the Miyazaki movies tend to start off with a little bit of a line to kind of explain what's going on. We had this with Nausicaa, we had this with The Cat Returns, we had this with a few other ones, but it's a only in silence the word, only in dark the light, only in dying life, bright the hawk's flight in the empty sky. It's like the opening quote setup from the movie. So the movie basically just begins with this galley, this war galley, this ship out at sea, and they end up interacting with this storm, and the weather wizard on the weather sorcerer or whatever on the ship is having problems with trying to communicate with the storm because he can't remember the true name of the winds and the storm and everything like that. And while they're watching this storm happen, they see these two dragons fighting above them in the clouds. And so they're like, okay, that's not good, because dragons are kind of supposed to be like above humans in regards to like, I guess, morality in this regard. Hi, Brenda. And what ends up happening is the two dragons fight, and eventually what ends up happening is one of the dragons kills the other, and the dragon that died or lost falls into the ocean. From there, we cut to the land of Inland, which is led by a king. I don't remember if I ever put his name down, but I don't really care. But we have this king, and we're shown part of this kingdom that I think is supposed to be based off of like Byzantia or something like that, but I'm not sure. And we have this king, and he's holding council, and at council, kind of, you know, he's getting updated on like all of the different problems that are going on in the kingdom. You know, lots of the crops are not growing, lots of the livestock is dying, people are having fevers break out all over the country, and different things like that. There's droughts that are happening. So there's all of these bad things that keep happening, kind of just like piling on top of each other. So I guess not quite as bad as like the plagues from Egypt, because like I don't think anything has turned to blood, and there haven't been an outbreak of frogs and locusts yet, but definitely not good as to what is going on. And eventually what ends up happening is, you know, the king and his advisors and, you know, his like advisor wizards and everything like that are trying to figure out what's going on. Trying to figure out a way of like fixing thing, and the king's, you know, he's coming up with reasonable suggestions for like what they can do to try to figure out what's going on, and like, well, let's consult and find out what's going on and different things like that. So he seems to be like someone who actually cares about his people quite a bit. Do you want out of the room? Is that what you want? She wanted out of the room. I let her out of the room. But the king seems to take quite a bit of concern in regards to his people and everything like that. And we see him discussing things with his advisors. And then he gets this news that there have been two dragons that have been seen fighting. And he finds this as a very bad thing because, you know, whatever time ago, part of the origin story for like where man came from is that like at one point, you know, man and dragons were the same thing. And the dragons were the one that chose freedom, and the men chose possession. So there's like this, the dragons are supposed to be like above them in regards to like morality, and like have a much stronger connection to nature and things like that, whereas like the humans were the ones that chose possessions and greed and fear and different things like that. So the king is just very worried about this, and he's very worried about the plight that is being delivered upon his land, and everything like that, and the weakening of the balance in regards to like humans and nature, and the balance and magic and everything like that. I think there's also a line somewhere in here that like lots of different sorcerers and sorceresses and wizards and mages and whatever else you want to call them, lots of their magic is starting to disappear, as in like it's fading. They're losing their ability to even do simple spells at this point in time. So I think that's something else that's mentioned. As the king is working on, you know, just pondering things, he ends up trying to find, well, he ends up finding out that his son, Aaron, has kind of gone AWOL a little bit. And then, of course, we're also introduced to his wife, or the queen of the kingdom. And she's just like, don't bother with, you know, she's like telling the servants to not bother the king with the issues about the prince, because like the prince is like 17 and is perfectly capable of taking care of himself. So we have all of that. And they mentioned that like Aaron has been acting kind of strange lately, and they can't figure out why. So eventually, what ends up happening is the king ends up being on his own, and he ends up in this dark corridor where he ends up getting stabbed by a young man, and the young man turns out to be Aaron, and he just stabbed his father, steals his father's sword, and then flees the palace while his father lies dying on the ground. Which initially would be like, okay, well, that's not a good first impression to get of who's supposed to be one of the main characters of this movie. So we have that where Aaron kills his father and he flees the kingdom, and he has like his father's sword that is supposed to have like magic in it, and such, and like he runs off. One of the things that I know a lot of people want to say is like, oh, maybe there was like some type of a bad setup there or whatever. No, it's not stated of any kind. And even later on in the movie, Aaron states that he loves his father and that he regrets what happened, but there's something that made him do it. So I'm just going to address that now, and then I'll go over it a lot more when it gets to that point in the movie. Because a lot of people seem to be very confused by the fact of why Aaron stabbed his father when I was looking through some other discussions about this movie. And I'm like, well, I mean, I can understand why they would be concerned about why he stabbed his father. I would be concerned too, but that's not quite the case here. So what ends up happening is we cut to where we are introduced to this wandering man who we end up finding out his name is Sparrowhawk, and he is revealed later on to be the archmage of magic. So he's kind of like the highest echelon of magic in regards to what he is capable of and his knowledge and his rank and everything like that. And his name is Sparrowhawk, and as he's like arriving in this other country or this other area, he sees all of these ships that have basically been washed into this sand desert that like how they ended up there he doesn't know, but like clearly they've been there for a while. So this is just adding to the fact that there's been other issues that have been happening to the lands within, this is the realm of Earthsea, and there's like I think like 2 or 3 kingdoms that are involved here, and Inland is one of them, and then there's another one and such like that. So what ends up happening is, as Sparrowhawk is looking at the ships, he then starts hearing all of these wolves howling, and he looks out and he sees that Aaron, or this boy on a horse, I guess. It looks more like, it does not look like a horse in all honesty. It looks like some type of a deer type creature, but they just refer to it as a horse later on in the movie, so I'm just like, okay, it's a horse. Cool looking animal, but I don't quite think it qualifies as a horse. And he sees Aaron being chased by this pack of wolves, and Aaron gets knocked off the horse and he ends up being attacked by the wolves. And even though Aaron kind of is refusing to defend himself against the wolves, because he is of course still blaming himself for what happened to his father, so he doesn't think he deserves to keep living, so he's just like, yeah, go ahead, and like the wolves try to attack him. What ends up happening is Sparrowhawk saves him, and the wolves flee. Aaron looks at Sparrowhawk, looks deranged for a moment, and then passes out. So later on, Sparrowhawk has set up camp within some of the nearby ruins, and he's got Aaron there, and he's letting Aaron rest. And he ends up, eventually Aaron wakes up and they end up talking. Aaron is very concerned about where his sword is. He gives him his sword to make sure that, Sparrowhawk returns his sword and everything like that. And they end up talking and everything like that. And Aaron, I think, eventually does tell Sparrowhawk his name. Sparrowhawk does not tell Aaron his name quite yet, but he will soon. And one of the things that ends up happening is, I don't remember if it's specifically that Sparrowhawk asks him why he didn't fight back, but one of the things that Aaron ends up saying is, why fight for life? We know it's going to end anyway. So Aaron's in the depressed teenager mode at this point in time. Depressed, moody teenager mode of like, what is life worth if it's just going to end anyway? the point of life is that it does end, and that you're supposed to make the most of it while you have it, while you have the ability to, which is kind of the point of this dang movie. That's one of the points of the dang movie. So they end up talking a bit more, and the next morning the two of them end up heading out, and Sparrowhawk asks, asks Aaron, well, do you have anywhere else to go? And he's like, no. So Aaron joins Sparrowhawk, and they start traveling, and they travel for quite a while, and Sparrowhawk tells him his name and all of this stuff. So, they just travel for a little while, and eventually they end up coming to the city of Hort, which they call a town. Is not a frickin' town. This is not a town by any means. And as they're traveling and everything like that, they end up, they get to the town, and they're going through, and Aaron is just amazed by everything that's going on around him, the hustle and the bustle and all of these people in one place and everything like that. And he's just like, is there some type of event going on? And Sparrowhawk's like, no, this is the way it normally is. The city is very busy. And of course they're going through the market and everything like that. And, one of the things that happens is there's this little interaction because Sparrowhawk is trying to find Aaron a cloak that'll kind of cover up, Aaron's kind of nice-ish looking clothes, so that way it's a lot harder for him to be distinguished. And he ends up interacting with this woman who tries to sell them silk and then tries to sell them, cloth, and he ends up kind of berating her for the fact that it's you were a sorceress and now you're just selling wares. And she's like, well, my magic is gone, type of a thing. So there's this back and forth type of a thing where Sparrowhawk is learning that there's a lot of sorcerers and mages and stuff like that have been losing their magic. And as Aaron and Sparrowhawk keep going through the city, Aaron ends up kind of getting dragged aside by this, for all intents and purposes, he is a drug dealer, pulls Aaron aside and basically tries to trick Aaron into taking this type of drug. I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically supposed to be similar to, a very bad version of, it makes you exceedingly, happy and wonderful and everything like that, and buzzed and delighted and everything, and then it goes bad. And then it's supposed to get you addicted, and then more and more and more. So it's the take on that of, drug addiction and everything like that. And thankfully, Sparrowhawk shows up, stops Aaron from taking any of it, and points out the bad part of what's going on. And says, no, that stuff just, he describes it as, it's a very good way of describing it. How is it that Sparrowhawk describes it? He describes it as, it makes the mind leave the body and wonder and bliss, but when it returns, it is less and less of a return, and you eventually just wander until there is nothing, type of thing. So it's just it's supposed to be this play on how to explain drug addiction and stuff like that. Which, I have cousins that have dealt with drug addiction, and I know other people who have dealt with those types of issues, and I wish them luck for the ones that are trying to get treatment and trying to get better. That ends up resulting in Aaron gets kind of sick from hearing what it will do to the people, because he sees a bunch of people that are being affected by the drug. And him and Sparrowhawk go off, and Aaron is able to refresh himself at a very beautiful fountain, and they end up sitting and looking out over the city as they're just kind of talking, and Aaron ends up asking about something to do with the fact of a type of, he asks if that what is going on and what is wrong with the world is that there's a plight or something like that is causing, that there's a pestilence that's causing this. And Sparrowhawk is like, no, a pestilence would be a way of returning balance to things. This is something that is very much thrown out of balance. There's someone or something that is throwing things out of balance. And there's only one thing in the kingdom, or the one thing in the world, that would have the power of doing that. So they end up kind of separating a little bit. Aaron stays up on the, out on the lookout area for a little while, and Sparrowhawk kind of goes off to go back to the inn. There's also a joke in this where they're going through and they find themselves at an inn, and he's trying to get away into the inn. And the guy's like, no, the inn's full up. Try the stables. And I'm like, I really frickin' hope that's supposed to be a Christmas nativity reference, because if not, that's funny. Um, that found its way into the movie in the first place. It's like there's no room for them in the end. Go sleep in the stables. I mean, Aaron is kind of supposed to be like the savior of the savior of the story, so I guess that's a little bit applicable. But not going into the religious context of stuff, I just found that funny. But what ends up happening is Aaron eventually ends up, he senses something in the wind, and then he ends up like running off, and he ends up finding this girl who is being chased by slavers, who are, the people who are going through and buying this, catching the slaves to then sell them to the slave auctions and then sell them that way. So, and we actually kind of see when they entered the city for the first time, Aaron sees a slave auction going on, and he sees these slaves that are being carted off and everything like that. So it's just like he's being exposed to a very much more gritty part of the world than what he was used to as just the prince. So there's a lot of that going on. But it's like, okay, you're going to learn more about the world in a very, very harsh fashion. And from there, Aaron sees this girl being captured by the slavers, and she's fighting back, and she ends up actually biting one of them on the hand, which is really funny. When he's trying to taunt her, she bites him, and then she also has like this like burn mark on her face. I don't remember. I think it's on the right side of her face. I don't remember exactly. But she has like a burn mark on part of her face, so they're like ridiculing her for that. And then Aaron shows up. And so it starts off as, I think, him trying to stop them from hurting her. And then there's like this type of shift in Aaron's personality that kind of takes over, and he's able to very easily knock out the two henchmen slavers. And then when... Sorry, my mom's leaving for work, so Brenda is bark. Closed door. I'll open it again later and she can come back in. But what ends up happening is, so Aaron knocks out the two like assistant slavers, and then he's like facing down the main one who is trying to we find out that his name is Hare later on. Hare is trying to threaten the girl, and ends up, Aaron, he's trying to use the girl as a hostage, and Aaron's just like, I don't care about life. It's not I'm not trying to do a heroic act. I don't care. He's being, there's this presence or whatever that is like taken over him, and it is making him much more violent and care much less about anything, and care much less about anything. So what ends up happening is, the Hare, the slaver guy, gets scared and he runs off. Aaron calms down, and Aaron then, goes and checks on the girl, and she starts, she wants nothing to do with him, and then we hear a voice off in the distance calling Toru, and the girl runs off. Teru, and the girl runs off toward the voice, and Aaron is just kind of left alone after that. Eventually, Aaron ends up finding himself kind of by the docks, where he ends up falling asleep and having a dream about the rising sun. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but he has a dream, and then he's woken up by the slavers, who beat him up, capture him, kick his sword into the river, and then take him to sell him into slavery. They think the sword is worthless junk. So Aaron gets captured, and he wakes up in one of the slaver carts that is rolling out of town and everything. And while that's happening, on the way to wherever their destination is, the cart gets stopped, and it is actually Sparrowhawk that has shown up and has released like this huge amount of spell whatever to like incapacitate the people who are in charge of it. And then he comes into the back and releases Aaron and gets Aaron out of there. He also explains that Aaron is just like, but what about everybody else? And he's like, I removed all of their chains. It's up to them what they do next. So, Sparrowhawk is like giving them the choice. And then they, Sparrowhawk and Aaron they get to Aaron's horse, and then they ride off until they end up finding this farmhouse that is owned by a woman named Tenor, who is a friend of Sparrowhawk, or like she's like a patron of his or whatever. She helps him and everything like that, and like she has learned a lot about like spells and potions and stuff like that as well, because she makes medicines and different things along those lines, and she has animals and crops and all of that stuff. So they get there, and she's giving Aaron treatment because he was beat up before he was taken into slavery, and Aaron even asked Sparrowhawk, how did you find me? And Sparrowhawk's like, well, when you didn't return to the inn, I ended up looking all over for you, and then eventually I ended up having to cast a location spell or a finding spell or whatever in order to be able to find where you went. So that's how I found you. And he's like, well, I'm sorry I caused you trouble. And he's like, it's not a problem. And what ends up happening is, Tenor is taking care of Aaron, and we also end up meeting her ward, who is Teru, who is very shy and very timid when it comes to meeting Sparrowhawk. And then the next morning, when Teru comes in, she ends up looking into Tenor's bed, thinking that that's where Tenor is, and it's actually where Aaron is. And she recognizes Aaron, kind of freaks out, runs off, and gets angry at breakfast, which is kind of funny. So they're kind of all like getting used to each other in that regard. The next thing one of the other things that happens is, while that's happening, Hare, who's the head slaver, reports back to Lord Cobb, who is this very powerful wizard and the ruler of Hort. I don't know what she's barking at now. And ruler of Hort. So he's also exceedingly creepy looking. And I'm like, why? Why would you be anywhere near this man? Why would you serve this man? He looks creepy and crazy. He gives off evil wizard vibes the instant you see him. I'm sorry. Don't trust the creepy dude. So we have all of that. And so Hera is explaining that, like, so a bunch of our slaves were released by a wizard, and like he gives a description that is like Sparrowhawk with like the scar on his face and everything like that. And Cobb recognizes the description. So what ends up happening is Cobb actually ends up threatening Hare by like, he basically pulls like a force choke thing where he's like squeezing magic, and it's like actually squeezing like Hare's heart and such. So he's like messing with Hare that way and everything. We're introduced to Lord Cobb. He's exceedingly creepy, evil, blah 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 blah. Gives Hare, the slaver, orders to try to bring in Sparrowhawk and everything like that. We cut back to the farm where we have Aaron and Sparrowhawk are out helping with farm work, so they're helping like plow the fields and everything like that. And of course, Aaron is not used to this type of manual labor, and he keeps getting like scrapes and blisters and everything like that on his hands. And we end up having this moment where Aaron and Sparrowhawk are talking, and Sparrowhawk kind of gives Aaron this kind of a lesson about life. And he's like, listen to me, Aaron. Everything you see under the sun and stars owes its very existence to the balance. The wind and seas, the powers of the earth and light, all these do is well and rightly done within the equilibrium. But now men hold the power to control the world. Men must learn to do what leaf and whale and wind do naturally. It is for us to keep the balance. Everything that exists has its true name. The power of magic is nothing more than the power to command balance to command based on the knowledge of a thing's true name. But use that power respectfully, and balance the world, and the balance of the world is easily damaged. Spells should be made only when absolutely necessary. And so the reason this conversation happens is because Aaron kind of looks at Sparrowhawk while they're plowing everything, and he's like, but I thought you were a wizard. And he's like, well, yes, I am. And I think Aaron, so Sparrowhawk's like, so you're wondering why I'm not just using magic to like plow and turn the fields and everything like that. And Aaron's kind of like, well, yeah. So he gives him this whole explanation. Which Aaron is like, okay, that's a valid explanation. And it's like, basically, yeah, you have this power, but that doesn't mean that you have to use magic for everything. Doing things the manual way helps with keeping the balance and everything like that. It doesn't throw things out of whack. So they're kind of, talking about that. And eventually, they get back to work a bit longer, and then Tenor comes up, gives them food, and they end up talking a bit more. And she ends up explaining that like Teru is taking care of one of the lambs because it got sick, so that's where Teru is and all of that stuff. And then Aaron and Sparrowhawk go back to working. Later, Aaron goes to the barn where he finds Teru. Sorry, why do they both have T names? Finds Teru. And she's being very gentle with like this little lamb and making sure that it's okay. She sees him, gets very protective, and ends up like actually holding him at like stick, because she picks up one of the sticks in the barn and is just like threatening him with it. Because she's just like, the way you acted, I know that you're not like a good person, or I know that you're dangerous, or you don't care about life, or you here to hurt me and hurt the animals and Tenor and everything like that. And Aaron kind of apologizes for what had happened, but she's not quite willing to listen, and ends up running out. Later that night, Aaron ends up having this horrible nightmare where he's being chased by this presence that looks like him. He gets chased in the type of a bog type area where he's like drowning, and the person that shows up to pull him out of the bog is Sparrowhawk. And then Sparrowhawk turns into his father, and because of course he's still consumed by guilt about what happened with his father, he ends up, the father turns into Gloop and then attacks him, and then he's eventually kind of woken up by Sparrowhawk, and then he kind of passes out again because of the nightmare, which is reasonable. Eventually the next day, it ends up being that Sparrowhawk is going to end up leaving for Hort, so that way he can go and gather some more information as to what's going on with the balance, because it's like his job as Archmage is to try to figure out a way to fix what's going on with the balance. So that's where he goes. On his way there, he ends up passing these two women on the road that end up gossiping about him because he just came from Tenor's place. They get to Tenor's place because they need medicine for a sick child. And while they're there, the entire time they are judging and gossiping about Tenor and Teru, and then they see Aaron and they're gossiping more about him and all of this other stuff. And it's just like, really? You're at a supposedly witch's house, and you're gossiping and everything in front of her, in earshot of other people who have done nothing to you. Except like give you help in regards to like the sick children and different things like that. And they're just like literally doing it in front of everything, and like Tenor keeps like staring them down, and like, yeah, can I help you? Yeah, we need medicine. Okay, here's your medicine, leave, type of thing, and all that stuff. And on their way back, they end up coming across, Hare ends up coming across them. They recognize that Hare is a slaver, and they're just like, please don't take us, we're old women, nobody wants us. And he's like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. Is there anything strange around here? Have you seen anyone? Gives them like a description of Sparrowhawk, and they're like, yeah, he went that way, but he lives with he was staying with the witch that's up the road. Just go up the road and you'll find her house. Now give us our money. Doesn't end up giving them the money. He just runs off. And so I'm like, there, you get what you deserve. What ends up happening is kind of between those two things, Aaron and Tenor end up kind of having a bit of a conversation where Tenor ends up giving him a bit of Teru's. I don't know what she's barking at so much this morning. I'm sorry. Tenor gives Aaron kind of Teru's backstory, and she's like, well, I found her on the road. She was abandoned by her parents. They had abused her and they had burned her, and I found her and I nursed her back to health, and I have been taking care of her ever since. So we kind of get like that backstory, and she's like, Tenor or Teru has never hurt anyone. And all of this, and it's just like, Teru has never hurt anyone, and I have this connection with Sparrowhawk because he saved me at one point in time. It's Tenor's backstory is is one of the books that they don't really reference too much in this movie, where she was like a captive somewhere, and then Sparrowhawk saved her, and then kind of helped like lead her into the light. Show her hope and everything like that. Help her find light and hope again and everything like that. And she clearly is in love with Sparrowhawk. That's very evident, and I think he has like feelings for her as well, given the circumstances. So eventually, what ends up happening is Hare and the other slavers show up and threaten Tenor and Aaron and such, and they're like, where's the wizard? He's not here, blah 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 blah, and he recognizes Aaron as being one of the slaves that escaped and everything like that, and that he threatens them and then leaves, vowing that he will return. Which, spoiler alert, he does return. Why are you so anxious this morning? It's really way too cold to try to take her on a WALK, otherwise I would, but it's way too cold. So eventually what ends up happening is, during all of that, Sparrowhawk has made his way back to Hort, where he discovers Aaron's lost sword is in this shop, and he ends up, looking over the sword and ends up deciding that he's going to buy it. While he's at the shop, Hare comes by, seems to recognize Sparrowhawk based around recognizes Sparrowhawk's garb, turns him around, and Sparrowhawk has put like a disguise on himself so that way he doesn't look like Sparrowhawk anymore, and like tricks Hare, which doesn't seem to be that hard to do in all honesty, tricks Hare, and Hare is just like, oh well, if you see a man with a scar on his face and he's a wizard, tell him that I'm looking for him and that Lord Cobb is looking for him. And he's just like, well, who's Lord Cobb? I've never heard of him. He's playing dumb. And he's like, he's the ruler of this land and everything like that. So it's just like they go off, and then Sparrowhawk turns back around to the shop guy, the sword shop guy, and he's like back to normal, and he's just like, okay, sword shop guy, well, this is none of my business. Give me my money and I'll give you the sword. So he gets Aaron's sword back. The sword shop owner guy ends up saying, well, I can't even open it. It's like rusted shut. But it's a very interesting looking sword, and I found it and I figured I might as well polish it up and try to sell it. So Sparrowhawk gets the sword back. He then ends up making his way to where Cobb's castle is, because he recognizes the name Cobb because he's dealt with Cobb in the past. Makes his way to Cobb's castle and is kind of observing what's going on. While this is going on, Hare has reported back to Cobb, and Cobb is still being creepy and standing outside. I just refer to him as being exceedingly creepy throughout the course of this movie, because he is just very creepy throughout the course of the entire movie. I don't know if that's the way he's described in the books, but he is just very creepy in my opinion. In his appearance and in his mannerisms and everything like that, and he's got like these really long nails and everything. So he's just like, Harry's reporting, and he's just like, we didn't find it, but we found the woman that he stays with, and like we have a plan. And they're like, okay. Cobb sends them off, and so they head off to go do their plan to try to capture Tenor and everything. Back at Tenor's farm, Aaron goes off, and he ends up, he kind of follows where Teru is, and she's up taking care of the sheep, and she ends up singing. And it's this beautiful song about like trying to find your home and everything like that. And Aaron ends up actually crying as he's listening to her. Her song brings him to tears. After that, they end up just kind of sitting and talking, and he explains that, yes, I did kill my father, but I don't know why I did it. There was something inside of me that made me do it. And I regret it, but I don't know how to, I can't fix it, but there was this presence inside of me that made me do it. And there's this presence that keeps following me. And I'm scared that it's going to come here and that it's going to hurt you and Tenor and Sparrowhawk. And so he's just like very worried about that. And like Teru kind of calms him down a little bit. But when she gets back to the house, she finds out that Aaron has left. Aaron goes off and he decides that he doesn't want the presence to show up at the farm and to cause problems for Tenor and Teru. So he's worried about that. Aaron leaves and just kind of like goes to like wander off wherever he can go. Later that night, Hare shows up at Tenor's house, captures her to take her hostage to use her as bait to lure Sparrowhawk to the castle. He recognizes Teru, and they end up tying her up at like the fence post out at the gate to act as like this messenger. So that way, if she dies while she's, tied to the gate, there's nothing else, that'll be a pretty good message, I would say, to Sparrowhawk. So they ride off with Tenor and they make their way to Cobb's castle, where, they start making their way to Cobb's castle. While this is going on, Aaron is out wandering around, and he ends up feeling the unknown presence has returned, and it is following him again. And it chases him into like this, lake, and he ends up almost drowning in the lake. And while this is going on, Lord Cobb is creepily spying on him via, magic, shows up at where Aaron is, gets him out of the water, and takes him away from the other presence. The other presence then just kind of vanishes. He takes Aaron back to his castle. Aaron wakes up and is confronted with Cobb. Now, okay, first of all, if I ended up in this situation, which I hope I would not, if I ended up in this situation, I would be looking at this dude in front of me that clearly never got out of his emo teenage phase, which in itself is not a bad thing, but then he just starts acting very creepily toward Aaron and talking very creepily and everything like that. I would just be like, no, I wish to leave now. Please let me go. And such. So he's just like being very creepy, and he gives Aaron, I don't know what he gives him. He gives him like weird wine or something like that, and he like tells Aaron, no, I wouldn't try to poison you, which is like BS, because it looks literally like as they are talking, Aaron's face is getting like more sunken, and his lips are getting purple, and his eyes are getting like sunken in, and all this other stuff, and it just looks like things are not going well, because Cobb is like lying to him, and he's trying to persuade Aaron to think that Sparrowhawk is actually trying to use Aaron to discover the secret to eternal life. Easy 3 guesses. Cobb is trying to do the same thing. He's trying to trick Aaron, so that way Aaron will tell him his true name, so that way he can then control Aaron and then use Aaron against Sparrowhawk, so that way they can then capture Sparrowhawk. I mean, it's not a bad plan, but it's just like, okay, Aaron, I get that you're not necessarily in the full right place of your own head at this point in time, but don't trust the creepy man. Don't trust the creepy man. And it doesn't even appear like Cobb did any type of like specific magic on Aaron at that point in time. It's just like Aaron kind of just like eventually fell for it, because like he's like being lulled into what Cobb is saying. And Aaron ends up telling Cobb his true name, which is Lebanon, which then allows Cobb to control Aaron and keep Aaron subservient to his wishes. So, while that's happening, or after that's happening, Hare brings Tenor to the castle, where she kind of confronts, Cobb a little bit, and he's just like, throw her in the dungeon. That's where, we'll wait. She'll be bait for Sparrowhawk and everything like that. So typical, evil villain stuff. Sends her off that way. She sees that Aaron is there with Cobb, and that kind of throws her off. While that's all happening, Teru ends up managing to use her physical strength and leverage to uproot the gate out of the ground, the fence post gate out of the ground, gets the ropes off of her, and then runs off to try to figure out where Sparrowhawk is. She runs into Sparrowhawk. She tells him what happened. He gives her Aaron's sword, basically tells her to go and wait at the farmhouse and then not leave the farmhouse. He is going to go and save Tenor and try to find Sparrowhawk. So, save Aaron, excuse me. So, Sparrowhawk heads off to go to Cobb's castle, which is where he was going to go anyway. There's also this moment earlier in the movie where when Cobb is looking out over the valley or whatever, he ends up, there's this hawk that flies by, and he recognizes it as a symbol of Sparrowhawk, as a warning. So eventually what ends up happening is, of course, Sparrowhawk shows up at the castle and ends up shows up at the castle and makes his way inside very easily past the guards, which is kind of a trap. Actually, the whole thing is a trap, obviously, even though he knows he's walking into a trap. He's being very cautious. And then we have this confrontation between Sparrowhawk and Cobb. And it's revealed that Cobb and Sparrowhawk know each other, that they had once been, I don't know if companions is the right word, but they at least have a past together that at one point had resulted in Cobb almost dying, and he just has used a ton of magic in order to keep himself alive for the past however long. And he's of course taunting Sparrowhawk, and it's like, I have your woman here and everything like that. And then Cobb ends up bringing out first Cobb kind of turns into this weird goo thing, tries to attack Sparrowhawk, jumps away, and then Aaron shows up, and Aaron ends up fighting Sparrowhawk. And, Aaron is clearly being messed with by Cobb, and is, he's being controlled by Cobb, but there's also, he's not quite all there anyway, and everything like that. And Cobb is twisted, Aaron's opinion of Sparrowhawk and everything, and Sparrowhawk and Aaron end up fighting, and Sparrowhawk ends up actually managing to dodge and catch Aaron in a position that looks like Aaron would have stabbed Sparrowhawk had he not dodged at the correct point in time, pins Aaron, and ends up telling Aaron, listen to me, Aaron. No man nor any living thing in this world preserves their life forever, but only to men is it given to know that we must die, and that is a precious gift. This life but is both our torment and our treasure, was never meant to endure for eternity. Life is a wave on the sea. Would you force the sea to grow still to save one wave to save yourself? And one of the reasons why Aaron kind of fell for Cobb's trick is because Aaron, of course, Cobb is saying, well, I can help get rid of fear and worry and everything like that, and all of that, if we can open the door to, eternal life and everything like that. And of course, Aaron wants that because he doesn't want to have this fear of what he did to his father anymore. He doesn't want to live with that guilt anymore. So that's kind of one of the things that's happening there. That's one of the ways he was able to twist him. But via, Sparrowhawk and Aaron, Sparrowhawk is able to kind of break through to Aaron, but this still results in Sparrowhawk being captured by Cobb and then taken down to the dungeon. Cobb also reveals that within the walls of the castle, Sparrowhawk's magic is much less than it should be, because that's the way Cobb designed the castle. And of course, Cobb's intention is to gain eternal life and then to also like rule over both kingdoms. I think it's also revealed at some point in time that Cobb kind of put this type of madness inside of Aaron, and that's what made Aaron stab his father in the first place, and then that has resulted in Aaron kind of having like a personality split or a little bit of a problem with that, which I'll get to in a moment. But so Sparrowhawk is captured, is taken down to the dungeons, thrown in the dungeons with Tenor, and ends up, throws him into the dungeons with Tenor, and they're just kind of talking a little bit, and she's just like making sure that he's okay, but they're still both worried, obviously. By this point in time, Teru is trying to figure out where Aaron went, and she ends up running into this duplicate of him, which is the one that he was trying to run away from earlier. She ends up following the duplicate, which leads her to Cobb's castle, and the duplicate reveals that he is actually the light inside of Aaron, and that because of all of the fear that Aaron was feeling, this light side of him had to flee, but that he is not allowed inside the walls of the castle. But that Teru needs to go to the castle and needs to return the sword to Aaron, so that way Aaron can find a way to become whole again and help return, this part of Aaron to the rest of Aaron, so that way he is fully whole again. And this light apparition of Aaron ends up explaining and explains this to Teru, and then ends up telling Teru that, what Aaron's real name is, Lebanon. And, so she, and then he just kind of vanishes after he hugs her, which just makes her blush a lot, but, he kind of vanishes. And, so then Teru makes her way into the castle, kind of like, is working her way around, ends up finding the guards just kind of like having a little party and, drinking and everything like that, and talking about how Sparrowhawk and Tenor will, be executed at dawn and all of that stuff. And, she learns that like Aaron is somewhere in the castle, so she works on making her way through the castle to find where Aaron is. She finds Aaron, and she's trying to convince him that he needs to get up and that he needs to go fight and that he needs to help her save Sparrowhawk and Tenor. And that, she gives him a sword and just like, come on, we have to go and do this. We have to try to save them. And he can't bring himself to do it because like he's blaming himself still for what happened with his father. He's blaming himself for the fact that he fell for Cobb's trick, and for the fact that he, almost killed Sparrowhawk and led to Sparrowhawk being captured. And that he even stopped trusting Sparrowhawk in the first place because he was tricked by Cobb. So those are all the things that's going on in Aaron's mind at that point in time. And Teru ends up finally breaking through to him. And she is like, you think your life belongs to you? Tenor gave me my life. That's why I have to live, so that I can give life to someone else. Lebanon, this is the only way we can live forever. Because it's like the way, her variation of this is that the way that you can live forever is that you can pass on this part of like giving life to something else helps you live forever, whether that means you give life to an animal to help raise that animal, whether that means you give that to a child, whether that means you give that to the earth itself in regards to caring for the earth and for the plants and everything like that, that giving your life or passing on part of your life that way is a way that you can live forever in that regard, because that will then continue to be passed on in some way, shape, or form to another form of life, another entity, and everything like that. So there is that, that's what I think that Teru is trying to explain to Aaron. And what ends up happening is that kind of helps with breaking through to Aaron, and she ends up, getting him up, and she ends up, revealing to him her true name. And in the process of doing so, he has this vision where she is revealing what she actually is, and she explains that her true name is Tahanu. I think I said that correct. I apologize if I didn't. and that she is actually a dragon, because in this vision that she is showing them, there's a freaking dragon, and he's figuring that out, that like, oh, she's a dragon, oh boy. But she is still his friend, and she is still this girl that he has come to know, and that they are going to work together to try to save Sparrowhawk and Tenor. So they head off to go rescue Sparrowhawk and Tenor from Cobb, since it's about to be sunrise, and he's about to, you know, throw them off the high tower as like the sacrifice to open the door to eternal life. This is never 100% explained how he intends to make this work. Is he just going to like shove them off the thing and then activate some type of a spell and use them as a sacrifice? It's never explained. But so, you know, Sparrowhawk is up there on the balcony, and he's, you know, up on top of this tower, and he, you know, Tenor is, he's supposed to, Cobb is supposed to try to make Tenor be the one to push Sparrowhawk off the tower. Not gonna happen though, because she wouldn't do that. This results in Aaron and Teru make their way to the tower. They confront them. They defeat the guard, or Aaron defeats the guards very easily. And then Cobb is like, you know, oh, this is, you know, I'm going to achieve my goal anyway. So he's taunting them. And Aaron is just like, no. And he's finally able to, using his new understanding of nature and the true purpose of wizardry and balance and life, he is able to finally unsheath the magic sword, because the sword was forged by magic. It was his father's sword. I don't know if that means that it's supposed to be a sword that's been passed down through generations, but it was his father's sword. And now he is finally able to unsheath it and use it. Cobb tries to attack because he's using the force power again of like, you know, I'm going to crush your heart or whatever, which is when Aaron is able to, you know, activate, you know, finally able to use his, you know, will to activate the sword and open it. And he ends up cutting off Cobb's hand, and rendering, you know, Cobb unable to do magic at that point in time. This results in Cobb aging quite a bit, which is like, how did he age so much? This also deactivates any of the other magic that was holding Sparrowhawk and Tenor. So Sparrowhawk is now freed, but he's still weak. Cobb then ends up going on this rant where he, like, his hand turns into gloop, reforms, and then he just looks like he's getting older. He turns himself into gloop, attacks Teru, grabs her, runs off, and starts climbing further up another tower, which Aaron is now following them. He causes part of the tower to collapse, has Aaron, you know, Aaron follows him all the way up to like the roof of the tower area, where Cobb is just becoming more and more creepy with weird teeth, and then eventually he has like hollowed eyes that is just disturbing, and he's just like becoming less and less coherent. And his intention is to, you know, I guess turn Teru into the sacrifice, I guess, now. And it's finally up on top of the tower, and it's getting to be sunrise. And, you know, Aaron tries to confront Cobb by telling him, you know, what he's learned about life and death and everything like that from Sparrowhawk and Tenor. And Teru and everything like that he's learned. And Cobb is just not, he refuses to listen to any of this, because he's just going to use his magic to make himself live forever, because he's so scared of dying. Voldemort reference, anybody. With all of his Horcruxes, where he's not even human by the end of it. And he uses his tower starts to collapse again, and Aaron kind of falls. And Cobb is using this, you know, weird darkness power or whatever to like strangle Teru to death. But instead of dying, you know, he kind of walks off and is like gonna go into like do something with the sunrise. It's never exactly explained what his intention or what he intends to do beyond try to find a way to open the door to eternal life, which would just cause everything else in the world to just cease the ability to die in the process. So Teru is revealed to not be dead. She stands up and eventually ends up, you know, she reveals that she is a dragon, and she transforms into her dragon form, scaring the crap out of Cobb, which is, very easily done. And because as a dragon, she possesses eternal and everlasting life, that she is able to, use her power in order to defeat him. And she, sets him on fire and, destroys him. As the tower is collapsing, all this is happening, the slaver guards have probably like run off as fast as they can, and, Sparrowhawk and Tenor are like watching as this is happening. And Aaron ends up like jumping off the tower, and Teru catches him, and like they fly off, and they land in a field. Back at the castle that is now mostly collapsed, Cobb and Tenor end up making their way out. They find Aaron's horse, and they make their way to the field where Aaron and Tenor and Teru have landed. And Aaron and Teru are, Teru is still in her dragon form, and she eventually turns back into her human form, and the two of them, hug, and they're kind of able to like, be together and everything like that. He is, Aaron tells Teru that he intends to return to his homeland to repent for his crime and take whatever punishment is there for him. But that when he can, he will eventually try to come back so he can see her someday. And of course, after they're done talking and everything like that, Sparrowhawk and Tenor show up until there's like happy and hugs and, okay, you're okay and everything like that, and we're all good. And they all head back to, Tenor's farm, where, they make the boys new cloaks, and, Aaron makes himself a sword sheath so he can hide the sword better, and Sparrowhawk makes himself a new staff because it got destroyed. And then eventually, like they get to be a family for a little while, and then, Sparrowhawk and Aaron are going to head back to Inland, so that way, Aaron can go and, as he said, repent for his crime and everything like that, like he said he would do. And he heads off. And, the two of them head off, and Tenor and Teru are waving goodbye and everything like that. And, so that's kind of where that ends. But the last bit is like, Teru looks up at the sky, and she sees these dragons flying around, and that it's supposed to be this indication that the balance between the worlds and the balance within the world has been restored to how it should be. And that's basically where the movie ends, because there's not really anything else that happens after that. We get, like, the nice cover ending song and everything like that that goes on with that. But there's not really too much else. In regards to the cast, so Aaron is voiced by Matt Levine, which I swear I know his voice, but I just couldn't figure out what I recognized him from. Teru is voiced by Blair Rosanero. Couldn't find anything else about her as far as I could tell. Sparrowhawk is voiced by Timothy Dalton, so he's James Bond. He's also a Time Lord. Cobb is voiced by Willem Dafoe. So there's that. Willem Dafoe, I believe, was also in The Boy and the Heron, so he's kind of one of the returning voice actors. Tenor is Mariska Hargitay, sorry. So from The Closer. We have I think it's the guy who is Hare that plays the slaver. He's Jess Harnell, which I believe he is Wacko from Animaniacs, if I'm remembering correctly. But there's not really too much else there. There's not really anybody else worth mentioning, just because I don't really know who they are. So that's what there is there for, Tales of Earthsea. as I said, I don't have as much to mention about this, mostly just because it's not one that I'm as exceedingly familiar with as I am when it comes to, you know, other other Miyazaki movies. It's not one that I've had a huge amount of like, oh, so much emotional connection to, so much, you know, a sentimental attachment to, and everything like that. I enjoy the movie. It's just I don't have as much sentimental attachment to it or whatever. But that's what I have for Tales of Earthsea. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!